One of the toughest things for an athlete to do is in a high pressure situation, game on the line, is to be able to control their focus and not worry so much about the outcome. It's one of the hardest things to do. And today we're going to talk about that. And we're going to talk about just some simple strategies and tips you can do to get your focus locked back in and give yourself a chance to perform at a higher level, no matter how high pressure the situation is, no matter what the game is, no matter if it's a championship game, playoff game. It's not going to matter what situation you're in if you can kind of shift your focus off of one thing and into the next. And so that's what we're gonna get into today in the video. And we're going on a time right now where it's NFL playoffs and everyone's watching it. And yesterday, two teams got to the Super Bowl, and so they'll play in the Super Bowl game, biggest event of the year. They'll play that in 2 weeks, and it just brings this topic to mind up a little bit more. And so the biggest problem is this. As an athlete, we're constantly thinking about the output or the outcome, and we lack the ability to detach input from output, meaning that we are thinking so much about the output or the outcome of the result of what's going to happen, whether you win or lose, you get a hit, you strike out, you blow it, or you're the hero. You think about that so much that you lose the ability to focus on the input, the thing that you can control to make that happen. And so, for example, the most common one is trying to hit a home run, right? You don't hit a home run by just constantly thinking about hitting a home run. You hit a home run by thinking about squaring the ball up to the best of your ability and hitting the ball in the middle, and hitting the ball, being on time, putting a good swing on it. That is how you hit a home run. You focus on the inputs necessary to do something, and that will then lead to an outcome, lead to a output. And so we've got to be able to separate in our mind inputs from outputs. And it's one of the most important things as an athlete, one of the most important things for any high performer in any industry that you're in. And so to take it a step further from that, like we first have to be able to separate the two, output and input. But the step beyond that, in my opinion, is when you can now focus on the input or the thing you're in control of, right? Your one task at hand to focus on and be present on. You've got to still make sure that somewhere off in the distance, the output isn't still attached to that. And that's where a lot of us still struggle, right? We go up into a moment and maybe we're a hitter and we go up into our at bat and we say, okay, I'm going to focus on hitting the ball in the middle. Right? And you're telling yourself that, and you're trying to focus on that, but somewhere in the back of your mind, you still have that attachment of, well, what if? What if I don't? What if I strike out? What are people going to think of me? What's coach going to say? Is he going to bat me next game? And all of these thoughts start running through your head. And again, that's where you still have output attached to input. And you got to cut the cord. You have got to absolutely detach the two. And that is the real difference maker. Not just understanding the difference, but that's kind of level one. Level two, now more advanced, is being able to fully detach the two. And you only have so much capacity up here mentally. And so if you take all 100% of your mental capacity on the input, there's zero capacity left for the output. But if you're 50-50, where it's like, okay, I'm going to separate the two, and I'm thinking about the input, but I'm only halfway in, I'm 50% capacity on that, you're leaving a whole other 50% open for the ability for the outcome to come in and just ruin everything for you. And there's no way to focus when you have that kind of train of thought. And so detach 100%, not 80, not 90, 100% detachment, where you're just solely focused on the input. And when you can do that and commit to that and lock in on that, I promise you'll start to be able to live with the results a lot better and a lot more often, whether it was a success or failure, because you're so focused on this end that you're going to start to develop this habit of doing that more routinely, the more often you do it. And you're going to start to see that you're going to perform the best in this train of thought regardless of what happens. You know that your best chance is still being in this train of thought with inputs. For example, if you go in and you've never seen a 90-mile-an-hour pitcher before, and the first time you do that, the odds of you actually succeeding or getting a hit are very, very slim. And so if you go in there and you're worried about the outcome, and you're probably going to swing and miss on all three pitches. But if you go in there and you focus on the input, the only thing you can control, right? So it's probably your timing. If you go in there and focus really hard on just being as early as you can, catching the ball in front, shortening up your swing, right? Doing less, not more with your swing. All these things that can help with catching up to a faster pitch. You give yourself a better chance. You might still get out, but you know that that was the best possible chance to get a hit by staying in the train of thought on the inputs only, with zero attachment to the outcome. And when you do this more regularly, and again, this took me a long time to figure out. I kind of figured it out by accident, just through trial and error of listening to people who are my coaches, listening to people who are a lot better than me on how to perform at a high level. And it was always about being in the present moment. It was always about locking in on one good thing, one positive thing to help you get to your goal, one positive thing to help you succeed in that moment. It was never about having to figure everything out at once. It was never about having a super complex plan. It was revolved around hard work, but the hard work and the complexity is done more in practice. When you're in the moment, you want to succeed or give yourself the best chance to succeed in this one moment, at this one thing, at this one time. The train of thought is, what am I going to do in the present? What can I control right now to give myself the best possible chance? And the beauty of this too is this applies to anything else in life, not just baseball, not just sports. If you can focus on one good thing at a time of what you can control in the present moment, and you do that routinely and consistently, you get the best results. And so stop trying to control your outcomes. Stop trying to control your outputs. Control the inputs, and then that will lead to the outputs you want. And it's important to still have a goal and a vision of what you're trying to do, a purpose behind everything. And you check in on that periodically, not every single day, not every single moment. You check in on that from time to time, just so you know you're clear on what it is you're doing in the present moment. But you cannot drive yourself crazy about the goal, the outcome, the output. It does not help your performance. And it's also a lot less overwhelming to you, right? Because when your mind is just locked in on one thing and that thing only, there's not this feeling of stress or feeling like you have to multitask and always remember in the back of your mind this, that, and the other thing. And anyone who tries to multitask, I'm guilty of that. I'm horrible at it. But when we try to multitask and you're trying to focus on more than one thing at a time, it actually raises the stress levels inside you. And so it's making your stress worse, and it's also making your performance worse because you're not actually focusing on one thing and being able to perform at that one thing. You're doing three things at an average or below average level compared to doing one thing at a high level. And that's really important for anybody to understand if you're really trying to have the best outcome. When you focus on that one thing, your ability is going to be tripled what it would be if it's spread out into two or three things, or two or three thoughts even as an athlete. Think about being a hitter. Okay, you're up to bat, and if you're thinking about if you could throw a fastball or curveball, or what arm slot he's throwing at, or how many outs there are, and all three of those are thought at the same time, maybe what the count is, there's no way when the ball's released out of the pitcher's hand, you're going to have a good ability to focus on what you need to do. Even two thoughts are usually too much. It's one good thought. And to give yourself a chance to have one good thought, there's got to be a little bit of preparation before the moment. So for example, if I'm on deck, that could be a time to analyze what's happening, analyze the situation, how many outs, the pitcher, things like that. And then from there, you analyze, you observe what's going on, and then you pick what would be the best thing to focus on. And then you go in and you do that with that one focus. There's times for both, right? And so, as talked about before, this zooming in and zooming out. So some of the clients that I work with, we talk about that. And essentially what that means is when you're an athlete, you should be zooming in and out throughout the game. So like when an inning's over, you're zooming out, you're observing what went on, you're analyzing what you did right or did wrong and making adjustments. And then when the inning starts up again, then you zoom back in. And when you're zoomed in, you're focused on the one thing. You're in the present moment and just being as locked in as you can on that one thing. And then again, if you need to adjust, you need to call time, you need to take a break, that's when you zoom out. All right, you zoom out, you see what are all my options, what should I do differently, what should I do the same? Okay, you get clear on that, then you zoom back in. So there's really this constant process of like zooming out and in throughout the game, at least there should be, in my opinion, to give yourself the best chance to perform at the highest level. You're not doing this every second, you're not doing this every minute. You might not do this for 20, 30 minutes. You might be zoomed in on what you're trying to do for 20 minutes. Let's say your team's in the field and you're just focused on what you need to do as a fielder. Let's say you're on the base pass, it's the same thing. Let's say you're up to bat. Now at bats are shorter, so that might be a time where you can zoom in and out in between pitches if you need to. But again, every situation calls for a different task on your end. So you want to be you want to be smart about that if you can. But don't make it rocket science. Just have the ability to be present when you need to be present. Take a mental reset and zoom out and figure out what an adjustment is if you need to make one. And then zoom back in and go do that. But again, all of this stuff all revolves around inputs or outputs. And where is your focus? Is it more on the output, more on the input? And are you halfway in the door, halfway out the door? You got to fully detach. And so that's all I got for today. If you can really focus on that, practice it, try to apply it. Man, like apply this in just everyday things that you're doing. Whether you're sitting down doing homework, you're sitting at a computer doing any work at all, you're exercising, right? How present are you in the moment, right? How focused are you on what it is you're trying to do? Working out's a good one. Let's say you're working out and you're focused on doing an exercise. Are you really fully present on that exercise with how many sets you're doing, how many reps you're doing, with how good your form is, with how much effort you're putting into it? Or are you thinking about all these other things that are maybe distracting you from performing at the highest level, giving your best effort, doing the things that are in your control? You could go through a day, honestly, and probably practice this at least 10 times on just random tasks throughout the day, I promise. And so it's good practice, it's good mental practice, and I think it just kind of tunes you up mentally and gets you, again, gets these routines started to where if you kind of can think that way and now apply it to your sport, it's just going to make it a lot easier.